On the morning of March 12, 1999, the body of a young woman was discovered lying in a field on the outskirts of Jieshou, part of the Fuyang City municipality. At 9 in the morning, two Zhuanji Township residents were walking through the fields to their own plots of land when they stumbled upon a discarded watch. Thinking it a lucky find, the two men continued on and soon spotted a silver necklace lying on the ground. As one of the men squatted down to pick it up, he spotted what appeared to be blood on the surrounding crops. The two men followed the trail of blood, and it led them to the body of a young woman lying next to a wheat stack. The victim appeared to be around her mid-20s and exhibited extensive damage to both her head and face. Autopsy of the body showed the victim died from blunt force trauma, having suffered multiple blows from a metal pipe later found in a stream running through the field. However, the victim wasn't carrying an identity card or any other information that could help police identify her. Over the following weeks, police scoured through missing person reports searching for anyone matching the woman's description and sent out notices to surrounding cities and townships, hoping someone could put a name to the victim. DNA testing wasn't available at the time, so police were relying on people living in the area to help them identify the woman and allow them to begin the investigation proper. Time passed with no progress being made identifying the victim. Nobody matching her description had been reported missing, and police going door to door around various surrounding cities and counties left them coming up empty. With it looking increasingly like the victim wasn't going to be identified anytime soon, eventually the decision was made to cremate the body. The case was kept open, and evidence taken from the crime scene was stored. The victim's ashes were kept in the Jieshou City Funeral Home under the name Unknown Female Corpse. 10 years later, in the September of 2009, in the Henan province city of Xi'an, a man named Shen Qing received a phone call from Liu Jinxia, the wife of his longtime friend and former business partner Yang Zhicai. Liu Jinxia asked Shen Qing if they could meet, saying she had something important to tell him regarding his ex-wife. Intrigued, Shen Qing agreed. His ex-wife and mother to his eldest children had been missing for the previous decade, with neither family members nor friends having any contact with her since she disappeared. When she met with Shen Qing, Liu Jinxia broke down in tears and told him she believed her husband and his nephew ended the life of his ex-wife Mei Li in 1999. Shen Qing was somewhat taken aback to hear the accusation. He and Yang Zhicai had been close friends for many years, even after ending their business relationship, and every year Shen Qing was invited to celebrate Spring Festival at his friend's home. Furthermore, while both men found success after their business partnership dissolved, Yang Zhicai had gone on to emerge as the far more successful of the two. He ran a chain of health and beauty clinics with branches in various provinces, which had seen him amass a fortune of billions and become one of the wealthiest men in Xi'an. Finding it hard to believe Yang Zhicai had any reason to harm his ex-wife, Shen Qing pressed Liu Jinxia for more details. She responded saying that a niece of Yang Zhicai named Liu Lefang told her. According to Liu Jinxia, the ex-husband of the niece Liu Lefang was attempting to blackmail Yang Zhicai for 1 million yuan, around $120,000, threatening to tell the police Yang Zhicai ended the life of Mei Li if he failed to get the money. The niece claimed that the day after Mei Li vanished, Yang Zhicai told her that he and his nephew Wang Fuwei had both ended the woman's life. Liu Jinxia had few other details to give to Shen Qing. She wasn't sure herself if she should believe the story, and was hoping Shen Qing could tell her Mei Li was actually alive and well somewhere. Shen Qing couldn't put her mind at ease, saying he hadn't spoken with his ex-wife since her disappearance, but added that he heard from the parents of Mei Li that she supposedly moved to the city of Chengdu in Sichuan province, 1,300 kilometers to the west of Xi'an. Attempting to reassure her, Shen Qing told Liu Jinxia that he'd ask family members of Mei Li if they knew anything about her whereabouts. In 1995, Shen Qing was running a dental clinic in Xi'an when he met Mei Li, and as was common for young Chinese couples, they married soon after they began dating. 1995 would also be the year Shen Qing met Yang Zhicai for the first time, and subsequently entered into a business partnership with him. Yang Zhicai had been what was referred to at the time as a 赤脚医生, meaning barefoot doctor. With people who were able to attend medical schools or universities generally taking jobs in urban hospitals, the barefoot doctors served rural communities. They often had no formal training or qualifications to practice medicine, but picked up their skills from others who performed the duties of barefoot doctors. As China developed, programs were put in place to give barefoot doctors more training, allowing them to specialize in different areas of medicine. Yang Zhicai began training to specialize in treating conditions affecting the eyes. He traveled south to Guangzhou to attend a course, and while talking with other doctors there, he learned about the growing popularity of cosmetic surgery. In larger, wealthier cities, women with the financial means to do so were increasingly looking to undergo certain cosmetic procedures, with double eyelid surgery and breast augmentation being especially sought after. When he returned to Xi'an, Yang Zhicai set about opening a health and beauty salon with his wife Liu Jinxia. Along with offering the cosmetic surgery procedures, it provided massages, facials, hairstyling, and sauna facilities. While Xi'an wasn't an especially wealthy city, the business was among the first of its type in the area, and catering to a largely female clientele saw it quickly gain success. Shenqing, on the other hand, saw his business struggling to make money. People living in the area at the time didn't pay much attention to their oral health, and visits to the dentist were seen as an unnecessary waste of money. With them both working in similar fields, Shenqing and Yang Zhicai inevitably met, and seeing the success Yang Zhicai was having, Shenqing asked for some advice. Yang Zhicai informed him of the growing demand for the cosmetic procedures, and saw an opportunity that could benefit them both. He invited Shenqing to establish an office in his clinic where he could provide cosmetic dentistry, along with more traditional dental work and orthodontic services. Shenqing took him up on the offer, and soon saw himself earning significantly more money. However, while his professional fortunes improved, his private life was having problems. He began to feel that he and Mei Li rushed into marrying before getting to know each other properly, and that they weren't especially well suited. While he was very much focused on his career, she was much more of a free spirit, who didn't put much thought into the future. With the two men establishing their business partnership, Yang Zhicai invited Shenqing and Mei Li to move into his home. The two men made frequent trips to the city of Xi'an, 600 kilometers to the northwest of Xi'an, where they attended courses to improve their skills and gain higher-level qualifications. The wives got to know each other while the men were away, but Liu Jinxia became concerned when Mei Li would go out most nights, and noticed various men bringing her back to the house. She voiced her concerns to Shenqing, and while Mei Li denied she was cheating when he confronted her, eventually he realized they had very different personalities which didn't point to them having a long and happy marriage. In 1997, after being married only 2 years, the couple divorced. The split was surprisingly amicable, Mei Li appearing to agree that their personalities were just too different. With Shenqing having the more stable income, it was decided that he'd get custody of their child. Working alongside Yang Zhicai, Shenqing had managed to build his own business a good reputation around the city, so he decided to strike out on his own. He planned to move to a different part of the city, but asked Yang Zhicai if he could give Mei Li work and some training, so she'd have skills to help her find employment in the future. Until they agreed to divorce, Mei Li had been working as a receptionist in the dental office, but now, despite the amicable breakup, Shenqing felt it was better they didn't work together. Yang Zhicai agreed to help, and even allowed Mei Li to continue living in his home. Towards the end of 1997, Mei Li told Shenqing she was 7 months pregnant and that the child was his. Mei Li said she had no interest in raising the child alone, and asked Shenqing to take care of it once she gave birth. Already looking after their son, and having invested much of his savings into his business, Shenqing was unsure if he could take care of another child. Mei Li told him if he didn't take it, she'd put the child up for adoption. Ultimately, Shenqing decided he couldn't bear to see his daughter given away shortly after her birth, so decided to take care of the child with help from his parents. Up to this point, Shenqing and Mei Li had remained in fairly regular contact, but after she gave birth to their daughter, they spoke less and less. If he wanted to know how she was doing, he had to ask either Yang Zhicai or Liu Jinxia, with whom she was still living. But slowly even they saw less of her. Yang Zhicai was busy expanding his business in other cities and spent little time in Xi'an, and in his absence Liu Jinxia was managing the clinic. Then in 1999 Mei Li disappeared. When people asked about her, Yang Zhicai would tell them he had no idea where she went, saying she just left his home without a word. This wasn't especially out of character. Over the years she had little contact with her family, and prior to meeting Shen Qing had been something of a drifter, so initially little was thought of her disappearing. After meeting with Liu Jinxia and being told his old friend Yang Zhicai was responsible for the death of his ex-wife, Shen Qing wasn't sure what to do next. He didn't want to immediately report what he'd been told to the police, without at least something that could back it up. Not only was Yang Zhicai one of his oldest friends, but he was also now one of the wealthiest men in the city, with connections to people holding powerful positions. Furthermore, he was a well-liked and respected figure around Xi'an, known for his charity work and philanthropic nature, using his wealth to help various charitable organizations. Instead, Shen Qing spent the next months trying to track down Mei Li himself, looking up old friends and her family to see if anyone heard from her after she went missing. Mei Li never had an especially close relationship with her parents. They didn't even know she and Shen Qing got divorced until years after. At the time of his daughter's disappearance, the father of Mei Li had been working 2,100 kilometers to the northeast of Xi'an, in Henan province for many years, and rarely returned home. However, while it wasn't unusual for his daughter to not contact him for extended periods of time, after over a year of not hearing from Mei Li, her father decided to try and find her. He spoke with anyone he could find who knew her, only to be told she hadn't been in contact with them. Eventually he received a call from someone in Chengdu who claimed to be from Xi'an and who knew Mei Li. The caller stated he'd heard from people in Xi'an that he was looking for Mei Li, and told her father she was working in Chengdu, before naming the district of the city she was supposedly residing. The father of Mei Li eventually decided to make the trip to Chengdu in efforts to find his daughter, but when he arrived in the city and attempted to contact the person who told him she was working there, his calls went unanswered. He returned to Xi'an, hoping that one day, Mei Li would decide to get in touch with them again. Like her father, Shen Qing had no luck in tracking down Mei Li, so after speaking with his family, he decided to report what Liu Jinxia told him to the police in Xi'an. Before he did, however, he called Liu Jinxia to try and get more information, and what she said during the call left him convinced Yang Zhicai was somehow involved with Mei Li going missing. She rather bizarrely claimed that she never said her husband ended the life of Mei Li, and told Shen Qing that it was actually he who made the accusation against Yang Zhicai. He went to the police shortly after the conversation, but with little information about what exactly happened, he assumed the incident occurred in Xi'an. The police looked into the claim, but with Mei Li never being reported missing, and no unidentified female bodies seeming to match her description, the investigation made little progress. The accusation being made against a wealthy, influential figure almost certainly played a role in how the police handled the claim. With no evidence to support what Shen Qing reported, and officers not wanting to risk their careers detaining a powerful man on nothing more than hearsay, Yang Zhicai was never questioned about the accusation. In 2012, Shen Qing received a phone call from police in Jieshou. They asked if he could help with an old homicide investigation by possibly identifying the victim, who they believed was his ex-wife. After 3 years of silence from police in Xi'an, he was somewhat surprised that the police in another city were contacting him in relation to the case, but he readily agreed to assist the investigation. In 2009, niece of Yang Zhicai, Liu Lefang, and several members of her family fell violently ill around the same time. The doctors who treated the family diagnosed them with severe food poisoning, likely from consuming contaminated noodles, but Liu Lefang suspected her uncle was trying to end her life to keep his dark secret quiet. In 1999, Liu Lefang was being trained by her uncle to work at his beauty salon. During this time, she lived at his home alongside Mei Li and her cousin Wang Fuwei, who was 16 years old, the three of them all being trained to work for Yang Zhicai. On March 11, 1999, Yang Zhicai and Wang Fuwei said they needed to make the 200-kilometer journey to Jieshou to pick up some medical supplies, and asked Mei Li to join them. When they returned in the early hours of the following morning, Mei Li was nowhere to be seen. Liu Lefang asked why Mei Li didn't return with them. Yang Zhicai initially claimed she decided to find work in Jieshou, but that failed to satisfy Liu Lefang, who kept asking questions. She began pressuring her 16-year-old cousin Wang Fuwei to get to the truth, which eventually caused Yang Zhicai to snap. He told his niece that he and Wang Fuwei ended the life of Mei Li, and made it clear if Liu Lefang told anyone or brought up the topic again, then she'd be the next to disappear. She stayed quiet about it until she married a man who visited the health clinic wanting a prosthetic eye. Her future husband was something of a small-time gangster and lost his eye after a dispute with some other local criminals. Liu Lefang confided to her husband about her uncle's dark secret, and when they were getting divorced, he decided to blackmail Yang Zhicai, saying he'd stay quiet for 1 million yuan. Shortly after the threat was made, Liu Lefang and the other family members fell sick, which she firmly believed was an attempt by her uncle to poison her, leading her to tell Liu Jinxia about her husband's past, hoping she'd report it to the police. However, when nothing happened and still scared Yang Zhicai would try to end her life, she took matters into her own hands. She contacted the police in Jieshou and informed them that a man named Yang Zhicai was responsible for the death of a woman in the city. She was only able to tell the police the victim's name was Mei Li, and she believed the incident occurred around the Linquan County area. The Jieshou police found no record of any cold case involving a victim named Mei Li, and no record of anyone with that name being reported missing. With such scant information, the police in Jieshou began looking through case files of every unsolved homicide in the immediate and wider area with unidentified female victims. Ultimately, they found 10 possible cases, so began investigating each one, starting with the most recent. It wouldn't be until 2012 that the investigation team got to the March 12, 1999 case, having closed some of the other unsolved cases during that time. The investigation team eventually found that a report had been made about an unsolved case with police in Xi'an that occurred during the March of 1999, which also gave the name Yang Zhicai as a possible suspect. Finding out the victim's name was Mei Li, and the report had been made by her ex-husband, the investigation team got in touch with Shen Qing. When Shen Qing spoke with police, he was shown a panel of photos of all unsolved homicides the team were investigating, and asked if he could identify any of the women pictured. Despite severe damage to the woman's face, Shen Qing immediately pointed to picture number 7 and identified the woman as Mei Li. With the positive identification, a nationwide arrest warrant was sent out for Yang Zhicai and Wang Fuwei. On September 27, Wang Fuwei was arrested in Xi'an, and the following day, Yang Zhicai was detained by police in the Jiangsu province city of Wuxi, 650 kilometers to the east. Both men admitted to ending the life of Mei Li. However, while their stories matched when talking about the moments leading up to the assault, the motives and details of the homicide diverged. Wang Fuwei claimed that his uncle and Liu Jinxia got into a furious argument, which was related to Mei Li living with them. A few days later, his uncle approached him with an offer of 10,000 yuan, around $1,200 to help him get rid of Mei Li. For the 16-year-old boy who left education after middle school, 10,000 was a fortune, and he agreed to help. The trio then drove out to Jieshou, stopping in the township of Zhunji. Telling Mei Li they needed to visit an old friend, they began walking through a field. Wang Fuwei hung behind the others, and when they got a safe distance from the township, he struck Mei Li in the back of the head 3 times with a metal pipe. However, the blows weren't enough to end her life, and Mei Li fell to the floor groaning. Wang Fuwei claimed his uncle then took the pipe from him and began attacking Mei Li while she was on the floor, striking her multiple times in the head and face, until she stopped moving and making noise. They then threw the pipe into a nearby stream and headed back to Xi'an. In the years after the incident, Yang Zhicai always made sure to take care of his nephew, eventually allowing him to assume the management of one of his health clinics. In the confession Yang Zhicai gave, he claimed the motive behind getting rid of Mei Li was the damage she was doing to his reputation, and the influence she was having on his family, his niece Liu Lefang in particular. While the majority of people who visited his health clinic were women, men also came for the dental treatments. After Shen Qing left to start his own practice, Yang Zhicai had found someone to replace him, and Mei Li continued working in the dental clinic. Yang Zhicai claimed Mei Li began offering the male clients extra personal services, which damaged the business's reputation. He went on to accuse Mei Li of inviting the male clients to his family home to give special private appointments. At the time, Mei Li and Liu Lefang were sharing a bedroom, and his niece was often present when the men supposedly came round to see Mei Li. Yang Zhicai claimed Liu Lefang asked him to tell Mei Li to leave the home so she didn't have to continue listening to what Mei Li was doing with the men every night. He told the officers that their intention was only to scare Mei Li and get her away from the family, but said Wang Fuwei lost control and beat her with the metal pipe multiple times, accidentally ending her life. After giving their confessions, Wang Fuwei was taken to Zhuanji Township and asked to identify the location the incident occurred. However, either intentionally or because of the time passed, he seemed to struggle to recognize the exact location. Once Yang Zhicai finished his confession, he was handed over to the Anhui police and transported back to Jieshou. He and Wang Fuwei were charged with the intentional homicide of Mei Li, and despite the differences in the two men's confessions, the police felt they had a pretty open and shut case. However, when the investigation files were handed over to the city prosecutors, the case wouldn't go to trial. Yang Zhicai had the money to afford the best lawyers around, and once he was brought back to Jieshou and given the opportunity to speak with them, they quickly got to work, looking to get the charges dismissed through any technicality they could. They immediately questioned if Mei Li was actually deceased, arguing the police offered no proof of the claim. While an unknown female corpse had been found, since the body was cremated many years ago, there was currently nothing to prove beyond doubt that it was Mei Li. Furthermore, they suggested the positive identification of the victim by Shen Qing was unreliable. By the time of her passing, Shen Qing hadn't seen much of Mei Li in the previous year, and the image he identified as his ex-wife had significant damage and swelling to the face, which the lawyers argued didn't give a clear picture of the victim's true appearance. Testimony from the parents of Mei Li also allowed the lawyers to raise more doubts over Mei Li being deceased. They pointed out the fact that someone had contacted her father, saying she was working in Chengdu 3 years after the unknown female corpse was discovered. With the police not having investigated this piece of information, the lawyers said that the possibility Mei Li had been working in Chengdu needed to be looked at. The legal team then brought up an issue that would help Yang Zhicai later defend himself in the media. Lawyers brought into question the confessions the two men made, arguing it was strange that Wang Fuwei struggled to remember the location of the crime scene and suggested the confessions were coerced. With his lawyers doing everything they could to block the case going to court, the police had to release Yang Zhicai and Wang Fuwei. However, the news about one of the wealthiest men in the city being arrested and supposedly confessing to a homicide was soon all over the Xi'an media, and Yang Zhicai was happy to publicly defend himself. In an interview given to a prominent media outlet, he alleged the police forced him to confess to the crime. He claimed that while being held in detention he was denied food and water, deprived of sleep, and threatened with physical violence if he refused to sign the confession the police put in front of him. Ultimately, the lawyers were successful, and the prosecutor's office announced the police needed to provide more evidence for the case to reach trial. Extremely unhappy with the decision, the parents of Mei Li, along with Shen Qing, petitioned the courts for the trial to go ahead, but their pleas were dismissed. With the arrest significantly tarnishing his reputation, Yang Zhicai tried to rebuild his public image by stepping up his charitable work, always inviting the local media to publicize the philanthropy. Despite the charm offensive, the Anhui investigation team remained convinced he was guilty, and the Xi'an local media felt the same. While the investigation team attempted to get more evidence against Yang Zhicai, local journalists began digging deeper into the billionaire's private life. They interviewed several people who worked for Yang Zhicai in the various cities he'd opened branches of the health clinics, and while his employees in Xi'an described him as a good man, people he employed in other cities had a different view. One man who worked as personal driver in Xi'an for Yang Zhicai claimed that he surrounded himself with women whenever he visited the city, and wasn't discreet about engaging in intimate relationships with women who worked for him. The investigation team in Anhui continued their efforts to build a stronger case against Yang Zhicai and Wang Fuwei, but made little progress. When they spoke to Liu Jinxia in relation to her informing Shen Qing about her husband ending the life of Mei Li, she continued to deny the conversation ever took place, and that it was Shen Qing who made the accusation. She was now playing the role of dutiful wife, always being photographed alongside Yang Zhicai as he performed his charitable works. Liu Lefang simply refused to say anything when investigators tried to get more information from her, and when police attempted to track down her ex-husband who allegedly tried to blackmail Yang Zhicai, it was discovered he passed away in 2009. While there were obviously suspicions that the death had something to do with him trying to blackmail an extremely wealthy individual, it was just an unfortunate coincidence. Eventually police had to place less focus on the investigation, and both Yang Zhicai and Wang Fuwei remained free men. In efforts to get justice for their daughter, the parents of Mei Li continued to petition the courts, but with no new evidence to offer, nothing happened. During the initial investigation in 1999, the officers assigned the case had taken evidence from the crime scene. This included a steel pipe that was found in a stream running alongside the area the body was found, and samples of soil coated in the victim's blood. The evidence had been stored by the Jieshou police, and by 2018, developments in forensic investigation techniques had greatly advanced. The unknown female corpse case files had been reopened during a regular period when investigators go over cold cases, and the crime scene evidence was examined once more. Having been found in water, the steel pipe had little to offer, possible fingerprints and traces of blood washed away. However, the forensic examiners managed to pull a blood sample from the soil, from which they produced a DNA profile. The investigation team immediately contacted the parents of Mei Li, and soon enough they had a familial match, heavily pointing to the unknown female corpse being Mei Li. On November 9, 2018, Wang Fuwei and Yang Zhicai were arrested again, and this time his lawyers couldn't prevent the case going to court. On August 29, 2019, the case was heard. Yang Zhicai continued to protest his innocence, maintaining his original confession was coerced, but Wang Fuwei finally turned on his uncle. He pled guilty and stated both he and Yang Zhicai ended the life of Mei Li. He expressed his desire to apologize to the victim's family and offer them financial compensation. The family agreed to speak with him privately, later stating they accepted his apology and had come to an agreement over the compensation. Wang Fuwei also admitted that the motive behind his uncle wanting Mei Li gone was that she threatened to tell Liu Jinxia that she was having an affair with her husband. His statement in court remained consistent with his 2012 confession, with him admitting to being the first to strike Mei Li, and that his uncle finished the job. He also stated that after their initial arrest in 2012, his uncle ordered him to keep a low profile and not speak to the media, reassuring him that he and his lawyers would help them avoid being convicted. The family of Mei Li publicly forgave Wang Fuwei, but went on to say they'd never forgive Yang Zhicai as he refused to accept any responsibility for what he did. Both the accused were found guilty of intentional homicide, with Yang Zhicai receiving the death penalty. However, largely due to his age at the time of his conviction, the punishment came with a 2-year suspension. The sentencing of Wang Fuwei was a little more complicated. He was only 16 at the time of the incident, meaning he was still a minor, and wouldn't have been eligible for receiving the death penalty if he'd been arrested back then. It was argued that he wasn't fully responsible for his actions, with his uncle having a great amount of influence over him. Furthermore, his apology to the victim's family and their subsequent forgiveness would play a large role in him being sentenced to only 15 years in prison. Wang Fuwei accepted his fate, but Yang Zhicai did not, and he announced his intention to appeal the verdict. Generally, appeals are heard soon after they are officially filed, but in this case there was a longer than usual delay. People convicted of homicide in China, along with being given their sentence, also have to pay compensation to the victims' families, and have all personal property confiscated. Under normal circumstances, this is a relatively simple affair, as most condemned individuals don't have much to their name. However, Yang Zhicai was an extremely wealthy, successful businessman, who owned multiple residential properties along with a business empire of 2 medical clinics which performed cosmetic surgery, 4 health spas, and a further 100 associated stores located in various provinces. The appeal had to wait while the authorities put together an extensive list of his assets and investments. The numerous properties and businesses would essentially be auctioned off if his conviction was upheld, but the Chengdu health spa was of particular interest to the investigation team. Yang Zhicai resided in Chengdu while establishing the business in the city, leading the Anhui police to believe he was the person who contacted the parents of Mei Li and told them she was working there. Still protesting his innocence, Yang Zhicai denied any knowledge of this, but the call being made around the same time he was living in Chengdu seemed more than just coincidence. On November 10, 2021, the appeal was heard, but with no new evidence presented, the original punishment was upheld, but this time with an extra amendment. People handed suspended death sentences will commonly see the punishment commuted to life in prison, and subsequently the sentences are frequently commuted further for good behavior. In the case of Yang Zhicai, the courts made it clear that while it was possible his punishment could be commuted to life in prison, his sentence was legally restricted from being commuted any further, meaning Yang Zhicai was guaranteed to spend what remained of his life behind bars. By 2024, there was no public announcement stating Yang Zhicai had been executed, which suggests that in the end he escaped the death penalty and remains in prison. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. And hope to see you again for the next dark tale from the Middle Kingdom.